Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku took over the Justice League after their fall. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world had forgotten the color of hope. It had been 6 months since the disappearance. 6 months since the sky had fallen silent. No more scarlet and blue streaks breaking the sound barrier. No more golden lassos glinting in the sun, no more emerald lights streaking from the stars. The gods were gone, and humanity was left to tremble in the dark. The broadcast flickered on, the face of Cat Grant a grim mask of professionalism that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion in her eyes. It was the same broadcast that ran every night on every network that still had the power to transmit. A memorial. A reminder. A warning. 6 months to the day since the Justice League vanished. Her voice, usually so full of vibrant confidence, was a strained monotone. 6 months since the world lost its greatest protectors. In Metropolis, memorial services continue at Centennial Park, around the silent, empty plinth where Superman's statue once stood. In Gotham, Acting Commissioner Renee Montoya has issued another citywide curfew as the Falcone and Sionis crime families wage a bloody war for control of the Narrows. In Central City, on a flickering television in a cramped apartment in Metropolis's suicide slum, a family huddled together, the volume turned low. A young boy, no older than 7, pointed a trembling finger at the screen. "Mom, is he ever coming back?" His mother pulled him closer, her eyes staring at the ghostly afterimage of Superman's insignia on the screen. She didn't have an answer. No one did. All she could do was hold her son and pray to gods who were no longer there to listen. The broadcast cut to an image of the Hall of Justice, its gleaming white facade now sullied by weather and neglect. Weeds pushed through the cracks in the grand promenade. A layer of dust and grime coated the golden doors that had once opened to welcome the saviors of the world. It was a tomb now, a mausoleum for a pantheon. The world had moved on, not out of resilience, but out of a desperate, gnawing necessity. Villains who had once been footnotes in the grand sagas of good and evil were now warlords, carving out fiefdoms from the panicked populace. Lex Luthor, under the guise of stabilization, had effectively privatized Metropolis's police force with his LexCorp Sentinels, their cold, metallic faces offering a security that felt more like occupation. The dream was over. The age of heroes was dead. High above the smog and sorrow of Metropolis, a lone figure cut through the bruised twilight. Her flight was not the effortless, joyful soar of her cousin. It was heavy, deliberate, a duty performed rather than a freedom embraced. Supergirl, Kara Zor-El, patrolled the city that had once been his. He would have found a way, she thought, the same thought that had haunted her every waking moment for 182 days. He would have smiled, given them one of his speeches, and punched the problem into submission. He made it look so easy. Grief was a physical weight, a shroud of Kryptonian lead wrapped around her heart. She saw his face in the clouds, heard his voice in the whisper of the wind around her ears. The S on her chest felt like a brand, a symbol of a promise she didn't know how to keep. She was strong. She was fast. She was one of the most powerful beings left on the planet. But she wasn't him. She couldn't fill the void he had left. It was a hole the size of the sun, and she was just a flickering candle. Her superhearing, a constant, chaotic symphony of the city's pain, picked up the familiar sounds of a smash and grab. A pawn shop down on 42nd Street. A group of men with crowbars and cheap handguns. Pre-disappearance, it was a job for the MPD. Post-disappearance, it was a threat that could spiral into a bloodbath in seconds. With a sigh that felt heavy enough to ground her, she banked and descended, a silent, blue-clad specter of judgment. She landed behind them without a sound, the pavement cracking slightly under her boots. The men, high on adrenaline and desperation, spun around. Their eyes widened, first in fear, then in a sort of sneering defiance that was becoming all too common. "It's the other one." One of them spat. The words, meant to be an insult, landed like a physical blow. The other one. The replacement. The lesser. She didn't give them time to say more. A burst of heat vision, calibrated to melt the guns into slag without touching their hands, was followed by a gust of superbreath that sent them tumbling into a heap. She bound them with a bent lamppost and left them for the Lex sentinels to collect. There was no thanks from the shop owner, only a wary, fearful glance. She was a reminder of what they had lost, a living ghost of a better time. As she rose back into the polluted air, a profound weariness settled over her. This wasn't saving the world. This was pest control. Vandal Savage and his coalition had done more than just defeat the League. They had broken the world's spirit. And hers along with it. It was then that reality itself seemed to tear apart. Izuku Midoriya's world dissolved into a cacophony of screaming light and sound. 1 second, he was in Muzurifu, Japan, locked in a desperate battle with a villain calling himself Paradox. The man's quirk didn't create portals or warp space in a traditional sense. It unraveled reality, pulling at the seams of the universe like loose threads on a sweater. Deku had been moving in, preparing a 45% St. Louis smash, when Paradox had panicked, unleashing the full, uncontrolled force of his power. There was a sickening lurch, a feeling of being turned inside out. The familiar sights and sounds of his city, the cheering civilians, the wail of police sirens, the encouraging shout of Lemillion from the support line, were all swallowed by a violent, violet vortex. He felt the 7 quirks within him flare wildly, a discordant chorus of alarm. Danger sense shrieked, not at a punch or a bullet, but at the fundamental wrongness of his entire existence being dragged through an impossible dimension. Then, as quickly as it began, it was over. He was spat out, tumbling through the air, his landing cushioned only by a reflexive burst from float. He hit the ground hard, rolling across cracked asphalt, and coming to a stop in a tangle of limbs. His costume, his beloved gamma suit, was torn and scorched. The Air Force gloves were frayed, and a crack ran across the left side of his iron-soled boots. He pushed himself up, every muscle aching. His head swam. The vestiges within One for All were a frantic, confused murmur in the back of his mind. Where? He blinked, trying to clear his vision. This wasn't Muzurifu. The buildings were wrong, taller, more ornate, with a Gothic, almost oppressive grandeur. The language on the signs was English, but the script and logos were alien. The air tasted different, thick with pollutants he didn't recognize and a low-lying hum of fear. It was a tangible thing, a city-wide miasma of anxiety that made his danger sense tingle with a constant, low-grade thrum. He staggered to his feet, trying to get his bearings. He was in a wide street, littered with debris and overflowing trash cans. The sky was a bruised purple-orange, with no stars visible through the thick haze. He saw people, but they weren't the curious, admiring crowds he was used to. They were huddled, scurrying from doorway to doorway, their faces pinched with worry. They looked at him, at his bright, torn hero costume, not with awe, but with suspicion and terror. Is that one of them? Someone whispered from a darkened alley, yanking a child back into the shadows. One of who? Villains? But his costume was clearly heroic. He had to find out what was going on. Find a police station, a hero agency, find anyone. He took a tentative step forward, and that's when he heard it. A deep, groaning sound of stressed metal, followed by a collective gasp from the street. He whipped his head around. 100 yards away, the facade of a 10-story office building, its structure compromised by what looked like a previous explosion, was beginning to give way. A massive chunk of concrete and steel, the size of a city bus, was peeling away from the main structure, threatening to plummet directly onto a crowded intersection where traffic was gridlocked. People screamed, abandoning their cars, but a public bus was trapped, its doors jammed. It was full of terrified civilians. There was no time to think. No time to analyze or question where he was. People were in danger. His body moved before his brain could catch up. Green lightning, the unmistakable crackle of One for All, erupted around him. Full calling. 30%. He muttered, the familiar power surging through his veins. He shot forward, a verdant blur against the grim cityscape. The ground cracked under his feet with each step. In the space of 2 seconds he had closed the distance. The slab was groaning, pulling free. He didn't have the leverage to stop it from below. Analyze. Options. His mind, a finely honed machine of heroic strategy, kicked into high gear. Can't just punch it. The shockwave would kill the people in the bus. Can't catch it. Too much momentum. I'd be driven into the ground. I have to redirect and support. Black whip! From his arms and back, tendrils of pure, dark energy erupted. They were not wild and untamed like they had been in his youth. These were precise, controlled, an extension of his will. Multiple whips shot out, wrapping around the falling slab like a colossal net. At the same time, another dozen tendrils anchored themselves to the surrounding, more stable buildings, creating a massive, makeshift suspension system. The strain was immense. He grunted, digging his iron saws into the asphalt, the muscles in his back and shoulders screaming as he took the weight of 1,000 tons. The slab jerked to a halt, dangling precariously 20 feet above the bus, shedding dust and small pebbles. The civilians on the bus stared up, their faces a mixture of terror and utter disbelief. He wasn't done. The support was temporary. He had to clear the area. Everyone, get back! He yelled, his voice, amplified by his mass modulator, cutting through the panicked silence. Clear the area, now! He looked at the slab, then at the weakened building it had detached from. The whole structure was unstable. He needed to resolve this with precision. He let Blackwhip take the full strain, freeing his right arm. He took a deep breath, focused his power into his fingers, and flicked. Delaware smash. Air Force. Not one, but a rapid-fire succession of 5 compressed air bullets shot from his fingertips. They weren't destructive blasts. They were surgical strikes. The first 4 impacted the underside of the hanging slab at carefully chosen angles, nudging its center of gravity, causing it to swing away from the intersection and over an empty, debris-strewn plaza. The final, more powerful shot struck the weakened wall of the main building, creating a concussive force that pushed it inward, stabilizing it just enough to prevent a total collapse. With a final mighty heave, he used Blackwhip to swing the massive slab into the plaza, where it crashed to the ground with a deafening roar, sending up a plume of dust that momentarily blotted out the twilight sky. He landed lightly in the middle of the street, the green lightning receding as he powered down. He released Blackwhip, the dark tendrils retracting into his body. He stood there, breathing heavily, and scanned the scene. The bus was safe. The civilians were scrambling away, but they were alive. The building was still standing for now. Mission accomplished. He turned to check on the people from the bus, a reassuring smile already forming on his lips under his mask, the smile he'd learned from All Might, when a new, piercing frequency and danger sense made him freeze. It wasn't a premonition of a falling rock or a hidden enemy. It felt cosmic. A threat descending from the heavens. Kara saw it all. She had been about to head back toward the relative safety of the Watchtower's abandoned orbital shell when a flash of impossible green lightning had illuminated the street below. She'd stopped, hovering in the stratosphere, her eyes zooming in with telescopic precision. She saw the building collapse. She saw the strange figure move with a speed that, while not Kryptonian, was still astonishing. And then she saw the black things, energy tendrils that defied physics, catching a slab of concrete that must have weighed hundreds, if not thousands, of tons. She watched, stunned, as he manipulated it with controlled blasts of force, saving dozens of lives with a combination of raw power and tactical brilliance that reminded her, painfully, of, no. Don't think about that. Her first instinct was hope. A new hero? Someone who had been in hiding? But that hope was immediately smothered by 6 months of paranoia and grief. Where had this person been? What was this energy he was projecting? It wasn't magical, it didn't match any known metahuman signature in the Justice League database, and it certainly wasn't from a lantern ring. In the New World Order, anything unknown was a potential threat. Vandal Savage had used alien tech, magic, and genetically engineered monsters. This could be just another weapon, a Trojan horse designed to inspire false hope before twisting the knife. She saw him land, the green aura fading. He was turning to the civilians, his posture relaxing. He looked like a hero. He acted like a hero. She couldn't afford to believe it. Her descent was a silent, controlled plummet. She landed 50 feet in front of him, the impact sending a spiderweb of cracks through the already damaged street. The air shimmered around her fists. "Stay where you are," she commanded, her voice dangerously low. The boy, he looked barely out of his teens under the mask, froze. He held his hands up slightly, a universal gesture of non-aggression. "It's okay," he said, his voice slightly distorted by his mask. "I was just helping." "I saw what you did," Kara retorted, her eyes beginning to glow with a faint, crimson light. "I also see an unregistered meta with an unknown energy signature appearing out of thin air at the epicenter of a major catastrophe. You have 10 seconds to tell me who you are and where you came from before I make you." Deku's mind raced. Her analysis of him was terrifyingly accurate. This woman, floating slightly off the ground, radiating an aura of immense power that made his danger sense hum like a live wire, was not a villain. Her posture was authoritative, like a police officer or a high-ranking pro-hero. But her tone was laced with aggression and mistrust. "My name is Deku," he began, trying to keep his voice calm and steady. "I'm a pro-hero. There was an accident with a villain's quirk. I don't know where I am." "Quirk? Pro-hero?" Kara's eyes narrowed. The terms were meaningless. Gibberish. Lies. "What are you? Another one of Savage's experiments? A contingency from Brainiac?" Her voice grew colder with every name. The very air around her seemed to drop in temperature. Deku realized with a jolt that he wasn't being questioned. He was being interrogated by someone who had already decided he was guilty. His instincts screamed at him to de-escalate. "I don't know who those people are," he said honestly. "Look, I don't want any trouble. Can you just point me to the nearest hero agency or police station?" "There are no hero agencies," she snarled, the words dripping with bitterness. "The heroes are gone." Before Deku could process the chilling finality of that statement, she moved. She wasn't trying to kill him, he realized that instantly. But she was trying to incapacitate him, and she was not holding back. She lunged, a blue and red blur of motion. Deku's body, honed by years of combat, reacted. He activated full cowling to 35%, the green lightning flaring back to life. He used FA gene to build up kinetic energy, then released it in a single burst, propelling himself backwards and upwards, flipping through the air to avoid her charge. The spot where he had been standing was now a 3-foot-deep crater. "She's strong. Unbelievably strong. On par with All Might in his prime." His analytical mind screamed. Flying, super strength, what else? He landed on the side of a building, clinging to it with his feet, and watched as she hovered in the air, her crimson eyes flaring brighter. Heat vision. He recognized it from his comic book collection back home. 2 searing beams of red energy lanced through the air. Deku leaped, pushing off the wall as it melted into slag behind him. He used float to stay airborne, propelling himself with small, controlled bursts of air force. He was purely on the defensive, a green hummingbird evading a hawk. "Stand still!" Kara roared, her frustration mounting. He was faster and more agile than she had anticipated. It was like trying to catch smoke. "Please, just listen," Deku yelled back, weaving between her attacks. "I'm not your enemy." He used Black Whip, not to attack, but to swing between buildings, putting distance between them. He needed to find a way to talk her down. But how do you reason with a grieving, terrified hurricane? The chase tore through a 3-block radius of the already damaged city. Kara's attacks were powerful but unfocused, her rage making her sloppy. Deku's movements were precise, economical, his entire focus on evasion and minimizing collateral damage. He saw an opening. She was preparing another heat vision blast. He used gearshift, a quirk he had only recently mastered, altering the speed of his own body. To Kara, he simply vanished. He reappeared behind her, his hand raised not to strike, but to perform a calming gesture. "I don't want to fight you," he was too close. She spun around, her fist connecting with a wild backhand. Deku didn't have time to dodge, only to cross his arms in a defensive block, channeling 45% of One for All into them to absorb the impact. The resulting shockwave shattered every window for a quarter of a mile. Deku was sent flying, tumbling through the air like a ragdoll. His arms screamed in protest. He could feel hairline fractures forming. The force was astronomical. He righted himself in midair, his mind reeling. "She's holding back. If that was a real punch, my arms would be gone." He landed hard on a rooftop, sliding across the gravel. Before he could recover, Kara was on him, her shadow falling over him. It's over, she said, her voice a low growl. Suddenly, a series of sharp cracks echoed through the street below. High-tensile cables shot up from the surrounding rooftops, firing from gas-powered launchers. They wrapped around Kara, crisscrossing her body. For a normal metahuman, they would have been unbreakable. For Kara, they were an annoyance, but a momentary one. Supergirl, stand down. That's an order. A new voice commanded over a loudspeaker. Deku looked down. On the street below, a black armored vehicle had screeched to a halt. Figures in tactical gear, armed with futuristic-looking rifles, were taking up positions, and stepping out from the vehicle's passenger side was a figure that commanded authority. He wore a dark, armored suit with a stylized blue bird emblazoned on his chest. In his hands he held two eskrima sticks. Nightwing. Kara struggled against the cables, snapping a few with sheer strength. Nightwing, he's a threat. Unknown energy signature, appeared out of nowhere. I have eyes, Kara. Dick Grayson's voice was tight, weary. He looked from the enraged Kryptonian to the strange, green lightning kid on the roof. The kid wasn't moving to attack. He was just watching, his posture wary but not aggressive. And I also see he hasn't thrown a single punch. Power down. Now, there was a moment of tense silence. Kara looked at Nightwing, then back at Deku. The crimson glow in her eyes slowly faded. The fight went out of her, replaced by that familiar, crushing exhaustion. The remaining cables fell slack. Deku, seeing the standoff was over, made a decision. He knew what he had to do. He had to show them he wasn't a threat. Slowly, deliberately, he let the green lightning of full calling die down. The power of one for all receded, becoming a quiet hum beneath his skin once more. He straightened up, his fractured arms throbbing, and raised both his hands in a clear, universal sign of surrender. Nightwing's gaze was sharp, analytical. He took in the torn, brightly colored costume, the strange mask, and the undeniable power that had just been on display. He had seen gods fall and monsters rise. He had no idea which category this newcomer fell into. He kept his calm, his eyes never leaving the boy on the roof. Oracle, you getting this? Loud and clear, Dick, Barbara Gordon's voice crackled in his ear. His energy readings are off the charts, but they're stable. Almost peaceful, now that he's powered down. I've never seen anything like it. Dick Grayson looked up at the strange visitor, a boy who could go toe-to-toe with a Kryptonian and chose not to. The weight of a fallen world rested on his shoulders, and another impossible problem had just literally fallen out of the sky. He raised his voice, projecting it so both figures could hear him clearly, his tone devoid of warmth, leaving only a tired, steely authority. Who, he asked, the question hanging heavy in the polluted metropolis air, or what are you? The ride was a study in suffocating silence. Deku sat in the back of the armored transport, a vehicle far more military than heroic, flanked by two of Nightwing's grim-faced operatives. They didn't speak to him, their gazes fixed forward, their hands resting on the stocks of their advanced-looking rifles. In the passenger seat, Nightwing was a statue of coiled tension, his masked face illuminated by the intermittent glow of the streetlights they passed. Supergirl had vanished into the night sky the moment Nightwing had taken control, a streak of sorrowful blue disappearing into the oppressive clouds. Every nerve in Deku's body screamed. Danger sense wasn't just a warning system for physical threats, it was a barometer for emotion, and the atmosphere in the vehicle was a high-pressure system of grief, suspicion, and bone-deep weariness. It was a stark, chilling contrast to the boisterous camaraderie he was used to in the hero-filled vans of his own world. There, the ride to a crisis was filled with tactical briefings, encouraging words, and the low hum of shared purpose. Here, there was only the hum of the engine and the unspoken weight of loss. He tried to catalog his injuries. His arms were a latticework of pain, the fine network of hairline fractures from blocking Supergirl's blow knitting themselves back together with the slow, burning energy of one for all. He was healing, but the phantom agony remained, a stark reminder of the casual, almost thoughtless power wielded by the woman in blue. He had faced titans, all for one, Shigaraki, Gigantomachia, but her strength felt different. It was absolute, like arguing with gravity. The transport veered suddenly, descending into a darkened tunnel that wasn't on any public map. It was an old, abandoned subway service tunnel, the walls slick with grime. The vehicle's headlights cut a swathe through the gloom, revealing reinforced steel doors at the far end. They slid open with a near-silent hiss, revealing not a train station, but the entrance to a state-of-the-art hangar. The place was a hive of quiet, focused activity. It felt less like a hero's lair and more like a resistance bunker. Technicians moved with practiced efficiency between server racks and workstations. A sleek, bat-winged jet sat on a central platform, its canopy open like a waiting maw. The air smelled of ozone, machine oil, and stale coffee. Nightwing finally moved, stepping out of the vehicle and gesturing for Deku to follow. "This way," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Deku complied, his eyes scanning every detail of the base. It was impressive, but patchwork. High-tech systems were jury-rigged next to older, more conventional tech. It was a place built for survival, not for victory. He was led through the main hangar into a smaller, more concentrated command center. A massive holographic display dominated the central space, currently showing a cascading waterfall of incomprehensible code. And at the center of it all, bathed in the blue light of a dozen monitors, was a woman in a wheelchair. She had fiery red hair tied back in a practical bun, and her face, though etched with the same weariness as Nightwing's, held a sharp, formidable intelligence. Her fingers flew across a custom keyboard with a speed and precision that was a marvel in itself. This, Deku intuited, was the nerve center of the entire operation. "Oracle," Nightwing said, his voice a fraction softer. "This is him." Barbara Gordon, Oracle, didn't turn around immediately. A small, hovering drone detached from the ceiling and zipped over to Deku, circling him. A soft blue light washed over him, scanning him from head to toe. "Subject is human," her voice came, clear and crisp, from speakers around the room. "Male, late teens or early 20s. Metabolism is off the charts, cellular regeneration is accelerated. There's a bioenergy field I can't classify. It's not a metagene as we know it. It's like a constellation of different energies all housed in one body, with one massive, star-like source at the core." She finally swiveled her chair around, her eyes sharp and analytical, meeting Deku's. "It's a miracle you're not exploding." Deku blinked, unnerved by the accuracy of her assessment. "It's my quirk," he said, the word feeling alien in this new space. "Quirk," Nightwing repeated, crossing his arms. The word dripped with skepticism. "Right. Let's start with that. Sit down." He gestured to a sturdy, metal chair bolted to the floor. It felt very much like an interrogation room. For the next hour, Deku explained. He told them everything, starting with the basics of his world, a society where 80% of the population was born with superhuman abilities called quirks. He explained the rise of heroes as a profession, the establishment of hero agencies, and the role of the government. He spoke of the greatest hero his world had ever known, All Might, the symbol of peace. And then, his voice dropping, he explained the nature of his own power, one for all. "It's a sacred torch," he said, his hands clasped in front of him, his gaze earnest. "A quirk that can be passed from one person to another, stockpiling power and accumulating the quirks of its previous users over generations. I'm the 9th holder." Nightwing let out a short, humorless laugh. "A transferable superpower given to you by your heroes so you could be the next him. You have to admit, it sounds like a children's story." "It's the truth," Deku insisted, his brow furrowed. "The energy Oracle detected, those are the vestiges of the past holders. Their consciousness, their quirks, they're all inside me." "Ghosts," Nightwing scoffed. "You're powered by ghosts." "Dick," Oracle's voice cut in, a clear note of caution. She brought up a complex waveform on the main screen. "His biometrics are steady. No elevated heart rate, no telltale signs of deception. Polygraphs would be useless, but the data suggests he believes what he's saying." She turned her gaze back to Deku. "You said your mentor, All Might, was the symbol of peace. A pillar for your whole society. A hero so powerful and so good that his very presence deterred villains and inspired hope on a global scale." Deku's face lit up, a genuine, radiant smile breaking through his confusion for the first time. "Yes. Exactly. He was the greatest. No matter how bad things got, you knew everything would be okay when he showed up, laughing in the face of danger. He leaned forward, a spark of connection in his eyes. You must have someone like that here, right? A symbol of peace for your world? If I could just talk to them, I'm sure they could help me understand what's happened, maybe even help me find a way home. The room fell silent again. The oppressive quiet from the transport returned, 100 times heavier. Deku's smile faltered, the hopeful light in his eyes dimming as he looked from Oracle's suddenly pained expression to Nightwing's rigid, stone-like posture. Nightwing turned away, his gloved hand clenching into a fist at his side. Izuku, Oracle said, her voice gentle now, laced with a profound sadness. She used his given name for the first time, a gesture of empathy that felt like a prelude to a tragedy. The reason we are so cautious, the reason the world is the way it is right now, is because we had people like that. She typed a command into her console. The cascading code on the main screen vanished, replaced by a pristine, high-resolution photograph. It was a group portrait, taken in what looked like a satellite orbiting the Earth. 7 figures stood together, bathed in the light of the planet they protected. A man in red and blue with a noble, kind face and a symbol of hope on his chest. A dark, imposing figure with a bat emblem, his expression a grim shadow. A statuesque woman of impossible beauty in armor of red, blue, and gold, a golden lasso at her hip. A man in sleek red, a lightning bolt on his chest, grinning with infectious energy. A man in green and black, his hand holding a ring that pulsed with emerald light. A bearded king holding a golden trident, the seas seeming to bow to his presence. And a green-skinned man with piercing red eyes, his form regal and alien. Deku stared, his breath catching in his throat. They were like something out of a myth. The power, the confidence, the sheer goodness that radiated from the image was overwhelming. They were everything he had ever aspired to be, magnified 1,000 times over. They were the Justice League, Oracle said, her voice a near whisper. They were our pillar. Our hope. Our gods. She paused, taking a shaky breath. And 6 months ago, they were taken from us. They're gone, Izuku. All of them. The words hit him like a physical blow, harder than Supergirl's punch. Gone? The concept was so fundamentally wrong, so contrary to the very definition of a hero, that his mind refused to process it. Heroes didn't just disappear. The symbol of peace didn't fall. If they did, what was left? How? He managed to choke out, his voice hoarse. A villain? An accident? Nightwing turned back, his face a mask of cold, barely contained fury. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. A coordinated, systematic dismantling of everything we believed in. Vandal Savage, an immortal tyrant, formed a coalition. He used technology we couldn't comprehend, reverse-engineered from cosmic threats they had defeated, to create a weapon. It didn't just kill them, it targeted them, one by one, and unwrote them from reality. Scattered them across time and space. As far as the world is concerned, they simply ceased to exist. The full weight of it finally crashed down on Deku. The fear on the streets. The crumbling infrastructure. The oppressive despair. It all made a sickening kind of sense. This was a world that had not just lost its champions, it had its heart torn out. It was a world without a symbol. He felt a profound, vicarious grief wash over him. It was the same hollow feeling he'd felt when All Might's time ran out, when Sir Night-Eye had died in his arms, but amplified to a global scale. He looked at Nightwing and Oracle, and for the first time, he truly saw them, not as interrogators or potential allies, but as survivors. As orphans of a fallen age. His own predicament, being stranded in a foreign dimension, suddenly felt small and insignificant. To make him understand, truly understand what had been lost, Oracle opened the archives. If you're going to be here, she said, her voice regaining some of its professional steel, you need to know who they were. The holographic screen flickered to life, not with a static image, but with action. News footage, security recordings, battle logs. A lifetime of heroism played out before Deku's eyes. First came Superman. He saw him lifting a collapsing oil rig from a raging sea, his expression one of intense concentration, not strain. He saw him talking down a frightened, superpowered teenager from a rooftop, his voice a soothing baritone of reassurance. He saw him flying into the heart of a raging solar flare to save a space station, emerging moments later with a smile and a wave. Deku watched, mesmerized. He found himself muttering, his analytical mind taking over, a habit he could never break. The control. He's a living nuclear reactor, but he moves with such gentleness. Every action is calculated to prevent collateral damage. He's not just punching the problem. He's managing the fallout of his own power in real time. The sheer mental fortitude that must take, it's more impressive than the strength itself. In her corner of the room, Oracle's eyes widened slightly. The boy saw it. He saw the part of Superman that most people, even those who revered him, missed. The footage shifted. Now, it was a creature of shadow and fear. Batman. Moving through a warehouse full of armed thugs like a ghost. He wasn't a brawler. He was a predator. Every movement was precise, efficient, exploiting fear as a weapon. Smoke pellets, the snap of a grappling line in the dark, a silent takedown, a flicker of a cape. It was over in seconds, a dozen men left groaning and bound for the police, their weapons untouched but their nerves shattered. He uses his body as a delivery system for his mind, Deku whispered, leaning forward, completely captivated. He's not just fighting them, he's solving them like a puzzle, using the environment, their own fear, their numbers against them. He establishes absolute psychological dominance before the first punch is even thrown. It's terrifyingly brilliant. Nightwing flinched, a barely perceptible tightening of his jaw. He was hearing an outsider perfectly articulate the very essence of the man who had raised him. Next was Wonder Woman. She stood alone on a battlefield, deflecting a barrage of alien energy blasts with her bracelets, the movements a blur of grace and power. She wasn't just defending, it was a dance. She moved with the fluid lethality of a warrior and the compassion of a diplomat, disarming her opponents with her golden lasso, forcing them to face the truth of their actions. She doesn't want to hurt them, Deku observed, a note of awe in his voice. Her fighting style is built around de-escalation and submission, not annihilation. She meets overwhelming force with immovable integrity. She's fighting for peace, not just victory. The symbolism is perfect. On and on it went. The flash, a joyous, laughing streak of red lightning, evacuating an entire city block in the seconds between a bomb's trigger and its detonation, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated delight in his ability to help. Green Lantern, creating fantastically complex energy constructs from sheer willpower, his imagination his only limit. Aquaman, commanding the fury of the ocean itself, a king defending his world as much as his own kingdom. For Deku, it was like being shown a sacred text. These weren't just heroes. They were ideals personified. Each one represented a different facet of the perfect hero he and his classmates had always strived to be. Superman's compassion, Batman's intellect, Wonder Woman's grace, Flash's joy. When the final recording faded to black, leaving only the reflection of his own wide, stunned eyes in the dark screen, a crushing weight settled in his chest. A cold, heavy dread that had nothing to do with his own situation. Imposter. The word echoed in the silent chambers of his heart. How could he possibly exist in a world that had once been guarded by such giants? His power, one for all, was immense, a gift from generations of heroes. But he was just Izuku Midoriya. A nerdy, anxious boy from Mizurufu who had only just begun to feel comfortable in his role as the symbol of peace. To them, he would be a child playing with a lightning bolt. He felt a profound, overwhelming sense of inadequacy. He didn't belong here. He was a pale imitation, a shadow of the legends whose ghosts now filled this room. His hands resting on his knees began to tremble. The spell was broken by a sudden, jarring klaxon. Red lights flashed throughout the area, bathing everything in an urgent, crimson glow. On the main screen, the memorial footage was replaced by a live satellite feed of a city skyline Deku didn't recognize. "What is it, Babs?" Nightwing snapped, instantly shifting into command mode. "It's Central City," Oracle reported, her fingers a blur on the keyboard. "Mass psychic event. Citywide panic. All automated systems, traffic control, power grid communications, have been compromised." A new window popped up, showing a security camera feed. A massive, silverback gorilla with a complex, cybernetic helmet on its head sat on a throne of mangled cars in the city's central square. It's Grodd. He's turned the entire city into his personal weapon. The feed showed traffic lights turning green in all directions simultaneously, causing horrific pileups. Automated floodgates on the central city dam were beginning to open. LexCorp's security drones, part of a new city defense initiative, were turning their weapons on civilians. It was chaos, orchestrated by a single, malevolent mind. He's creating a feedback loop, Oracle analyzed grimly. The more fear he generates, the stronger his psychic hold becomes. We need to get in there and take him out, but the entire city is a death trap. Nightwing's face was grim. What are our assets? Minimal. Red Hood is tied up in the Narrows. The Titans are scattered dealing with the fallout from a Cobra cell in Markovia. Supergirl is not answering. Her calm Oracle's voice was strained. It's just us, Dick. Your ground team isn't equipped to handle a psychic of Grodd's caliber, and the city's defenses will tear the wing apart before you can get close. Nightwing slammed his fist against the console. Damn it, it was a checkmate. Without a speedster to run interference and bypass the citywide traps, a direct assault was suicide. They were leaders without an army, generals without a champion. They could only watch as another city burned. Deku watched the screen, his heart pounding in his chest. He saw the faces of the people trapped in their cars, their expressions contorted in mindless terror. He saw a mother shielding her child as a drone took aim. It was Muzutafu. It was Kamino Ward. It was Jaka's city. It was the same nightmare, just with different names and different faces. His imposter syndrome, his fear, his confusion, it all evaporated, burned away by the white-hot core of his being, the singular, driving instinct that had defined him since he was a small, quirkless child crying in front of a computer screen. Someone needs to be saved. He stood up. The movement was so sudden it drew both Nightwing and Oracle's attention. He walked towards the main screen, his eyes locked on the image of the terrified child. The trembling in his hands had stopped. His expression was no longer one of a lost boy, but of a determined man. A hero. His psychic powers, Deku said, his voice quiet but clear, cutting through the tension in the room. You said he's controlling them with his mind? He's one of the most powerful telepaths on the planet, Nightwing said, his tone dismissive. What's your point? My quirk, Deku said, turning to face them. One for all. It's not just my power. There are 8 other consciousnesses inside of me. To a telepath, it might be like trying to listen to 8 different radio stations at once. He took a breath, the decision already made. I can get to him. And I can stop him. Nightwing stared at him, a complex mixture of disbelief and desperation warring in his eyes. This stranger, this anomaly, this kid who claimed to be powered by ghosts, was offering to walk into a psychic storm that would shred the minds of normal men. It was insane. It was reckless. It was the only option they had. Deku looked at the chaos on the screen, then back at Nightwing, his green eyes filled with an unwavering resolve that seemed to echo the heroes he had just witnessed. I can help. The wing, as Nightwing called it, was a marvel of silent, predatory engineering. It sliced through the turbulent air above the storm-racked coast, its matte black fuselage absorbing all light, rendering it virtually invisible against the bruised twilight sky. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was as cold and pressurized as the hull. Deku sat strapped into a jump seat behind the 2 pilots, Nightwing and one of his tactical operatives. The space was cramped, functional, and smelled faintly of hydraulic fluid and ozone. On a holographic display before them, a map of Central City pulsed with angry red icons, each one a crisis point in a city having a synchronized seizure. Oracle, give me the sitrep. Nightwing's voice was clipped, all business. The weary interrogator from the area was gone, replaced by a field commander radiating an aura of grim competence. It's worse than we thought. Barbara's voice crackled through the comms, clear despite the distance. Grodd's psychic control is absolute. He's not just influencing people. He's puppeteering the city's entire automated infrastructure. The Central City monorail is on a collision course with the Star Labs research annex. He's using the city's new Safe Streets initiative to turn every traffic bollard and automated vehicle into a weapon. The place is a blender, Dick. And at the center of it all is Grodd, amplifying his power with every scream. What about the Flash's contingencies? Nightwing asked, his hands moving deftly over the controls. Grodd anticipated them. He's using the rogue zone captured tech to create localized disruptions. The speed force is so chaotic in that area, even if we had a speedster, they'd be running blind. A heavy silence filled the cockpit. They were flying into a fortress where the walls themselves were the enemy. Deku, Nightwing said, not turning around. Your role is simple. Create a diversion. Draw fire. You're the biggest unknown variable we have, so be loud and be durable. My team will use the opening you create to infiltrate the CCPD headquarters. Grodd set up his throne in the main plaza right outside. We'll plant a psychic dampener near his location. Once it's active, his hold should weaken enough for us to get a clean shot. Deku listened, his analytical mind processing the strategy. It was a standard infiltration plan, a tank to draw aggro while the rogues slipped in to disable the boss. It was sound, tactical, and cold. What about the civilians? Deku asked, his voice cutting through the military precision. Nightwing finally glanced back, his masked lenses unreadable. The civilians are hostages and, at the moment, part of the weapons system. We save the city, we save them. That's the mission. The finality in his tone left no room for debate, but it settled uneasily in Deku's gut. To Nightwing, the people were a secondary objective, an inevitable consequence of liberating the city. To Deku, they were the mission itself. It was a fundamental, chasm-like difference in their heroic philosophies. We're approaching the exclusion zone, the pilot announced. Stealth systems are holding, but it's a soup of psychic interference out there. Deku looked out the reinforced canopy. Central City glittered below, a beautiful, deadly jewel. But as they got closer, he could see the chaos. Fires bloomed in the downtown core. The river that cut through the city was churning, its dam controls flickering erratically. The entire city was a symphony of disaster, and he was about to become the lead instrument. Get ready, Nightwing ordered. Drop him on the bridge as planned. The wing's bomb bay doors opened, not with a roar, but with a whisper of hydraulics. The wind howled below. Deku stood, took a deep breath, and gave Nightwing a single, sharp nod. He didn't need a parachute, he just needed to fall. As he leaped from the belly of the jet, the world exploded into a vortex of wind and psychic noise. The pressure on his mind was immense, a physical weight of raw, unfiltered terror. It was the collective panic of a million souls, weaponized and focused into a single, crushing wave. He felt a phantom headache begin to bloom behind his eyes, but beneath it, the quiet hum of the 8 vestiges in his soul was a comforting, grounding presence. He landed on the central suspension cable of the O'Shaughnessy Bridge, his iron-soled boots magnetizing for a moment to stop his momentum. Below him, the bridge was a parking lot of death. Automated cars, their lights blazing, were systematically ramming into stalled vehicles, creating a tangled mess of steel and fire. Green lightning erupted around him, a beacon in the twilight gloom. Full cowling, 35%. He didn't charge towards the city center. He charged towards the chaos. His first move wasn't an attack, it was a rescue. A family was trapped in a minivan, a driverless city bus bearing down on them. Deku became a verdant blur. Black whip! Tendrils of dark energy shot from his arms, wrapping around the front axle of the bus. He dug his heels into the asphalt, the road cracking under the strain as he brought the multi-ton vehicle to a groaning, screeching halt just inches from the minivan's bumper. He didn't pause to admire his work. He ripped the jammed door off the van, scooped the family out, a terrified mother, father, and 2 small children, and leaped to the safety of the bridge's pedestrian walkway in a single, fluid motion. It's okay now, he said, his voice modulated to a calm, reassuring tone. You are safe. He was gone before they could even stammer their thanks. Back in the wing, orbiting at a safe distance, Nightwing watched the scene unfold on his tactical monitor, a feed supplied by a micro-drone. What is he doing? He muttered, his voice tight with frustration. His objective is the city center. He's wasting time, is he? Oracle's voice was thoughtful. Grodd's power is fueled by fear, Dick. Look at your readings. Nightwing glanced at a secondary screen displaying the city's psychic output. In the small bubble of chaos Deku had just resolved, the angry red of the map had cooled to a stable, hopeful blue. It was a tiny island of peace in an ocean of terror. He wasn't just saving people. He was actively weakening the enemy by creating hope. It was a strategy so antithetical to his own training, so absurdly emotional and untactical, that it had never even occurred to him. Deku became a whirlwind of focused chaos. Danger sense, which had been a constant, low-grade hum of citywide anxiety, now flared with sharp, specific warnings. A spike of premonition behind his left eye. He dodged just as a traffic light pole, torn from its foundation, slammed into the spot where he'd been standing. A cold dread in his gut, he fired an Air Force blast to divert a runaway fuel tanker before it could plow into a group of huddled evacuees. He was using the quirk not just to protect himself, but as a compass, guiding him through the storm to where he was needed most. As Nightwing's team rappelled down from the wing into the shadowed alleys near the police headquarters, Deku provided the perfect cover. Smoke screen! He exhaled a thick, billowing cloud of black smoke, denser than any military-grade pellet. It blanketed 3 city blocks, obscuring sight and thermal sensors alike. Under the cover of this artificial fog, Nightwing's team moved like ghosts, bypassing Grodd's automated sentries. Oracle, are you seeing this? Nightwing whispered into his comm as his team slipped through a maintenance hatch. He's a one-man support squad. He's a hero, Dick. Barbara's reply was simple, yet profound. It's been a while since we've seen one in its natural habitat. Deku pushed through his own smokescreen, his destination finally clear, the central plaza. As he moved, the psychic pressure intensified. Whispers slithered into his mind, no longer just random noise but targeted, insidious suggestions. You're alone. You can't win. They're all gone. You're just a child, playing with a power you don't deserve. The voices were trying to find a crack in his armor, a seed of doubt to cultivate into crippling fear. But they found fertile ground already occupied. The vestiges within One for All, usually a quiet chorus, began to stir. He could feel Nana Shimura's unwavering optimism pushing back against the despair. He could feel the second user's grim, unyielding stubbornness treating the psychic intrusion as just another wall to be broken. He felt Yoichi, the first, a calming beacon of pure light at the very core of his soul. The psychic assault felt less like a single, overwhelming voice and more like a loud, obnoxious heckler trying to interrupt a symphony. Annoying, but ultimately powerless against the combined harmony. He broke through the smoke and into the plaza. The sight was something from a nightmare. Gorilla Grodd sat on a throne of crushed police cars and ambulances, his massive, silver-furred form radiating an almost visible aura of psychic energy. His eyes, intelligent and ancient, glowed with malevolent power from beneath the intricate cybernetic helmet fused to his skull. Around him, a squadron of mind-controlled police officers stood with their weapons raised, their faces blank, their movements jerky like puppets on a string. So, Grodd's voice echoed, not through the air, but directly inside Deku's skull, a deep, rumbling bass that vibrated through his bones. The little anomaly arrives. I felt your light pushing against my darkness. A flicker of defiance in a world that has already learned to kneel. You are not of this world, are you, child? Deku landed 50 yards away, the pavement cracking under his feet. He ignored the mind-controlled officers, knowing they were victims, not combatants. His focus was solely on the gorilla. Let these people go, Deku said, his voice amplified by his mask. Your fight is with me. Grodd laughed, a sound of pure contempt that rattled Deku's teeth. Fight? There is no fight. There is only the imposition of order upon chaos. Humanity is a panicked, stampeding herd. I am merely the shepherd, guiding them with a firm hand. They crave control, and I provide it. What do you provide, little hero? False hope? A fleeting moment of comfort before the inevitable return to anarchy? He raised a massive hand. Behold the peace I offer. The psychic assault intensified 100-fold. Grodd wasn't just whispering now. He was screaming directly into Deku's soul, trying to tear his consciousness apart. Failure. Imposter. Worthless. You let Sir Nighttide die. You couldn't save Bakugo. You will fail these people too, just like you fail everyone. You are unworthy of the power you wield. He was shown images, hyper-realistic and steeped in his deepest fears. All Might, withered and coughing blood, blaming him. His mother, weeping over his broken body. Uraraka, Todoroki, Ida, all turning their backs on him in disgust. It was a meticulously crafted assault on his very identity, but Grodd made a fatal error. He assumed he was attacking one mind. As the psychic onslaught tried to breach the final walls of Deku's consciousness, it slammed into a bulwark of sheer, unadulterated will. It was not one wall, but 9. "Stand up, boy," a woman's voice, warm and fierce, echoed from within. Nana Shimura. "A hero always smiles through the hardship." "Pathetic mental tricks," a gruff, ancient voice snarled. "The second user. Face him and break him." "We are with you, 9th, a chorus of voices whispered, a wave of reassurance and power that washed away Grodd's psychic poison. Deku's eyes, which had been squeezed shut in pain, snapped open. They blazed with green, incandescent light. "You're wrong," Deku declared, his voice ringing with the strength of 9 generations. "You talk about order, but all you create is fear. You see humanity as a herd to be controlled. I see them as people to be protected. Their potential, their ability to hope, to strive, to be better, that's not chaos. That's their greatest strength." Grodd roared in frustration, his mental assault shattering against the unified consciousness of One for All. He was trying to mentally dominate a committee of heroes. "Insolent gnat! If your mind will not break, then your body will," he gestured, and the mind-controlled police opened fire. Simultaneously, the very ground beneath Deku began to shift and buckle as Grodd seized control of the subway lines and water mains below. Deku moved. He used FA gene, storing kinetic energy with small, repetitive motions, then released it, seeming to teleport through the hail of bullets. Black whip tendrils erupted from his back, not to attack the officers, but to gently disarm them, plucking the rifles from their hands and tossing them aside. More tendrils plunged into the ground, reinforcing the street to prevent it from collapsing. "Nightwing, now!" he yelled into the calm bead Oracle had given him. "We're in position," came the terse reply. "But he's got a failsafe. It's tied to the dam. If the dampener goes live, a dead man's switch will open the floodgates. It'll flood the lower districts and wash away thousands." Deku's eyes darted to the massive command and control spire that rose from the center of the CCPD building behind Grodd. It was the nexus of his control over the city. Nightwing's dampener would break his mental hold, but they needed to sever his technological control at the exact same moment. He didn't have time for a subtle approach. "I'm going to take out the tower," Deku said, his voice tight with concentration. Green lightning began to arc around him with ferocious intensity. He could feel the power of One for All building, a roaring furnace in his chest. "Activate the dampener on my signal! Kid, if you blow that tower, the feedback will level 5 city blocks," Nightwing protested. "I'm not going to blow it up," Deku yelled back, planting his feet and sinking into a low stance. Red energy lines began to crackle across his body as he pushed past his normal limits. "I'm going to turn it off." Grodd saw the buildup of power and recognized the immense threat. He abandoned his throne, his massive knuckles cracking the pavement as he charged, a 400-pound gorilla of pure muscle and rage. Deku had seconds. He needed to channel an unbelievable amount of power into a single, precise strike. A 100% smash, but controlled. Not a cannonball, but a surgical shockwave. He focused on the memory of All Might's final battle, the sheer force of will it took to wield such power without destroying everything around him. The vestiges roared their assent. The air grew heavy, crackling with ozone. "Now, Nightwing!" Grodd was almost upon him, a giant hand reaching out to crush his skull. Deku unleashed everything. He threw his punch not at Grodd, but at the air in front of him, his body a conduit for a force of nature. Detroit. Smash! It wasn't an explosion. It was a wave. A focused, controlled tsunami of pure kinetic force shot from his fist. The air itself seemed to solidify, ripping across the plaza in a visible, shimmering shockwave. It bypassed Grodd, who was thrown tumbling backward by the sheer turbulence, and struck the control spire. There was no fire, no shrapnel. The spire didn't crumble, it imploded. Every circuit was fried, every system was overloaded, every wire was vaporized by the sheer, overwhelming kinetic energy. The lights on the tower flickered once and died. Simultaneously, Nightwing activated the dampener. The effect was instantaneous. Across the city, a million minds were suddenly, blessedly silent. The psychic screen that had blanketed Central City vanished. Automated cars sputtered and died. The mind-controlled officers slumped to the ground, groaning as their own consciousness flooded back in. Grodd staggered to his feet, clutching his helmet. The psychic dampener, and the destruction of his amplification spire had severed his connection. He was alone in his own mind for the first time in hours, and the silence was deafening. He looked up just in time to see the spire above him, its structural integrity gone, begin to topple directly towards him. He was too disoriented to move. He could only watch as his own monument prepared to become his tombstone. But then, a flash of green. Deku, his right arm screaming in protest from the force of the smash, pushed his aching body to move one last time. He fired 2 black whip tendrils that wrapped around Grodd's massive torso. With a final, desperate roar, he hauled the gorilla out of the path of the falling debris, which crashed onto the empty plaza with a deafening roar. Grodd landed in a heap, stunned and defeated. He looked up at the boy panting before him, his arm hanging limp and steaming slightly, his costume in tatters. He had been beaten. And then he had been saved. The sheer, idiotic nobility of it was more insulting than any punch. Nightwing and his team emerged from the shadows, their weapons trained on the fallen ape. Nightwing's eyes, however, were fixed on Deku. He had just witnessed a boy wield enough power to level a city block and use it with the precision of a surgeon. He had watched him endure a direct psychic assault from a master telepath. And then, at the end of it all, he had watched him risk his own exhausted body to save the life of the monster who had tried to kill him and enslave a million people. He didn't understand it. It was illogical. It was inefficient. It was the most heroic thing he had seen in 6 soul-crushing months. Back in the Eyrie, the mood was different. The oppressive silence was gone, replaced by a low hum of exhausted, but relieved activity. On the main screen, news reports from Central City were playing. They showed the aftermath, the damage, the confusion, but they also showed moments of hope. People helping each other from their cars. A young girl handing a bottle of water to one of Nightwing's dazed operatives. And then, a grainy cell phone video filled the screen. It was of Deku, his mask off, kneeling down to talk to a small child who had been separated from his parents in the chaos. He wasn't saying much, just offering a small, tired, but genuine smile. The child, who had been crying, slowly stopped and took the hero's outstretched hand. In the background, you could see the smoldering remains of the plaza. But in the foreground, there was just this quiet, impossible moment of gentleness. Nightwing stood watching the screen, his arms crossed. He had taken off his mask, and the exhaustion on Dick Grayson's face was plain to see. But for the first time, it was mingled with something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. Deku walked into the command center, his right arm now in a sophisticated medical brace. He was still in the rags of his costume, looking very young and very out of place. He stopped beside Dick, also watching the screen. "I hope I didn't overstep," he said quietly. "Your plan was to use the dampener, but your plan worked," Dick interrupted, his voice low. He turned off the screen and faced Deku fully. "I've spent the last 6 months trying to hold the line. Trying to be him," he gestured vaguely, a motion that encompassed Batman, the League, the entire fallen world. Tactics. Fear. Efficiency. We've been fighting a war of attrition, just trying not to lose any more ground. We forgot what we were actually fighting for. He looked at Deku, his gaze intense. "Today, you didn't just fight a villain. You fought the fear itself. That little island of blue on Oracle's map, that was you. The power is impressive, terrifying even, but that," he nodded towards the now dark screen where the image of Deku and the child had been, "is what this world has been missing. Not a symbol of vengeance or of tactical superiority. A symbol of peace." The weight of that title, which had felt so heavy and unearned in this new world, suddenly felt right. Dick Grayson extended his hand. It wasn't the gesture of a commander to a subordinate, or an interrogator to a subject. It was the gesture of an equal. An ally. "We need you, Izuku," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Not to be them. To be you. Deku looked at the outstretched hand, then into the eyes of the man who was no longer just Nightwing, but a fellow hero carrying an impossible legacy. He saw the same exhaustion, the same grief, but now, a flicker of the same light he tried to carry within himself. He took the offered hand, his grip firm. A fragile alliance, born of tragedy and forged in the heart of a psychic storm, had just become something real. Something new, and in the silent, hallowed halls of a fallen league, it was the first brick laid in the foundation of what was to come. The dawn that broke over Metropolis was gray and listless, the sun a pale, indifferent smear behind a blanket of industrial haze. In the subterranean depths of the Eyrie, however, a fragile light was beginning to kindle. The victory in Central City was a single candle in a hurricane, but it was burning nonetheless. Izuku Midoriya sat on a medical cot, the advanced autodoc humming quietly as it finished knitting the last of the microfractures in his arm. He flexed his fingers, the phantom ache of his Detroit smash a dull, receding echo. He felt a familiar exhaustion deep in his bones, the price of pushing one for all to its limits, but it was mingled with a feeling he hadn't truly felt since arriving in this broken world, a sense of purpose. Across the command center, Dick Grayson, sans mask, stood before the main holographic display. It wasn't showing news reports anymore. It was a global threat map, a terrifying tapestry of flickering red icons that stretched across every continent. A resurgence of Cobra cult activity in Asia, a weapons deal between Intergang and HIV. In Europe, a massive oil spill caused by corporate sabotage off the coast of South America. The victory against Grodd had been a monumental effort, and it had addressed exactly one of 1,000 fires. He's just one gorilla, Dick murmured, his voice rough with lack of sleep. He ran a hand through his dark hair. We pulled every available asset, threw our biggest unknown variable at him, and barely managed to stop one city from imploding. We can't keep this up. We're plugging a dam with our fingers while the whole thing is crumbling. Barbara Gordon wheeled herself over, her expression grimly pragmatic. He's right, Izuku. What we have is a reaction force. A good one now. But we're not a deterrent. We're not a solution. The world doesn't just need heroes to clean up messes, it needs to see them. It needs a presence. A league. The word hung in the air, heavy and sacrosanct. A league. The ghosts of the 7 founders seemed to stir in the silence. But who is left? Deku asked, sliding off the cot. He walked over to the map, his hero's mind instinctively categorizing and prioritizing the threats. Supergirl, she helped, but she didn't stay. Kara is complicated, Dick said, his gaze softening with a familiar pain. She's dealing with a loss that none of us can truly comprehend. She doesn't just feel like she's living in her cousin's shadow. She feels like she's living in his grave. She's terrified of not being enough, and even more terrified of losing anyone else. So she stays away. And the others on your list? Deku pressed. Oracle brought up a new screen, a collection of files, many of them marked with a grim inactive or rogue status. The pool of willing and able heroes has shrunk to a puddle. Many of the most powerful have gone deep underground, protecting their own families. Some have been broken by grief. Others have decided the old rules no longer apply and have become violent vigilantes. We need more than just power. We need people who still believe in what the League stood for. Deku looked from the map of a world on fire to the file of broken heroes. He thought of his own world, of the day Hero Society had nearly crumbled, and how it had been pulled back from the brink not by one person, but by the combined will of many, standing together. Then we have to convince them, Deku said, his voice firm with a resolve that seemed to surprise both Dick and Barbara. We have to make them believe again. He looked at Dick, a plan already forming behind his green eyes. If we're going to do this, we can't start with the broken ones. We have to start with the strongest. Where is she? Where is Kara? Part 1, The Girl of Steel. The Kent farm was an island of impossible peace in a world tearing itself apart. The air in Smallville, Kansas, was clean and smelled of rich earth and new-mown hay. A vast, impossibly blue sky stretched from horizon to horizon, a stark, painful reminder of the man who had once claimed it as his own. The wing had dropped Deku at the edge of the property line, a silent promise from Dick to give him space. As Deku walked up the long gravel driveway, he felt as though he were treading on hallowed ground. This was where he had grown up. The source of the compassion and humility he had witnessed in the archives. He found her in the barn. She wasn't wearing her suit. Dressed in worn denim jeans and a simple plaid shirt, her blonde hair tied back in a messy ponytail, she looked achingly human. She was hoisting a bale of hay into the loft, the muscles in her back cording with an easy strength that could have moved mountains. She performed the chore with a grim, focused intensity, as if her entire world had shrunk to this simple, physical task. She didn't startle when he entered. With her senses, she'd have heard him coming from miles away. She simply finished her task, then turned to face him, her blue eyes wary and clouded with a grief that seemed to dim the sunlight filtering through the barn slats. "If you're here for round 2, I'm not in the mood," she said, her voice flat. "I'm not," Deku replied softly, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. He took in the scene, the rustic simplicity of the barn, the iconic red S faintly visible on a tarp-covered piece of farm equipment in the corner. "This place, it's beautiful. Peaceful." "It was," Kara said, her gaze drifting to the empty fields. "Now it's just quiet." She walked past him, grabbing a bucket of feed. He fell into step beside her. He didn't speak of the world, of Grodd, of their fight. He just walked with her as she went about her chores. He watched her mend a fence post, her touch gentle despite her strength. He watched her feed the livestock, a quiet tenderness in her movements. She was hiding here, not from the world's dangers, but from its expectations. Finally, as they stood by a long fence overlooking the rolling Kansas plains, she spoke again. "Why are you here, Izuku?" "Dick and Oracle, we think the world needs more heroes. We want to build a team," he said simply. Kara let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "A team? You want to paint a target on your backs? Don't you know what happened the last time the world had a team of heroes? They were wiped from existence. I watched my cousin, the most powerful, most good man I have ever known, get torn from reality. And I couldn't do anything to stop it." Her voice cracked, and she turned away, her shoulders trembling. "That S, do you know what it means?" "It means hope," Deku answered without hesitation. "It means hope," she repeated, her voice thick with unshed tears. "And I'm not him. I can't be. Every time I put on that suit, every time I save someone, they look at me and I can see the disappointment in their eyes. They see me, but they're looking for him. I'm just a reminder of what they lost. This symbol, it's not hope anymore. It's a tombstone. And it is too heavy to carry." Deku was silent for a long moment, not formulating a counter-argument, but letting her pain fill the space between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and steeped in a familiar sorrow. "I know what that's like," he began. "To be given a legacy that feels impossible to bear." Kara glanced at him, her curiosity piqued despite herself. "My power, one for all, it was given to me by my hero, All Might," Deku continued, his gaze distant, lost in memory. "He wasn't just my mentor. He was the symbol of peace for our entire world. For decades, his presence alone was enough to keep society from crumbling. He was everything. And he chose me, a powerless, worthless kid, to be his successor." He looked at his own hands, clenching them into fists. "For years, every punch I threw felt like a pale imitation of his. Every time I saved someone, I worried I wasn't smiling wide enough, wasn't strong enough. I wasn't just trying to be a hero, I was trying to be him. And I failed, over and over. I broke my body, I alienated my friends. I nearly shattered under the weight of it." He then looked directly at Kara, his green eyes holding a depth of understanding that cut through her defenses. "But my greatest failure, the one that almost broke me for good, was when my teacher and friend, a hero named Sir Night-Eye, died. He could see the future. And he saw a future where I died fighting a terrible villain. He spent his last moments trying to change that future, and in the end, he was the one who paid the price. I survived, but he died right there, in my arms." He took a shaky breath, the memory still raw. "For a long time, I thought his death was my fault. Another part of the legacy I had failed. I thought that to honor him, to honor All Might, I had to carry that burden alone. I had to be perfect. Unflinching. A flawless symbol. He took a step closer to her, his voice dropping to a near whisper. But I was wrong. A legacy isn't a statue you have to live up to. It's not a ghost that follows you around, judging your every move. It's the ground beneath your feet. It's solid. It's real. And you can stand on it to build something new. Something that's yours. He pointed to the S on her chest, which she had unconsciously been covering with her hand. You're right. You're not your cousin. You can't be. Just like I could never be All Might. But he gave you a foundation. He showed you the way. He taught you how to be good. The world doesn't need another Superman. It just needs Kara Zor-El. It needs a hero. Tears she had been holding back for 6 long months finally began to fall, tracing clean paths through the dust on her cheeks. His words hadn't been a recruitment pitch. They were an absolution. He wasn't asking her to fill an impossible void. He was giving her permission to be herself. I'm scared, she whispered, the admission a profound relief. I am too, Deku admitted with a small, reassuring smile. All the time. But we're stronger when we're scared together. A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the gentle Kansas wind. Kara looked up at the vast blue sky, her cousin's sky. For the first time, it didn't feel empty. It felt open. Full of possibility. She wiped the tears from her eyes and looked at Deku, a flicker of the old, fiery determination returning to her gaze. Okay, she said, her voice still shaky but resolute. Okay. I'll fight. Part 2, The Hellblazer. Magic, Oracle's voice stated flatly from the wing's comm system. That's the next piece of the puzzle. They were flying back east, Kara sitting quietly in the back, her blue and red suit a stark slash of color in the drab interior. She hadn't said much, but her presence was a solid, reassuring weight. We've been analyzing the energy signatures from the sites where the League disappeared, Barbara continued. Beneath the layers of exotic temporal and dimensional energy, there's a consistent trace element, something old. Thaumaturgical. Savage used magic to help anchor his weapon, Dick surmised. To bypass their defenses. Diana's divine protection, John's telepathy. Exactly, Oracle confirmed. And if we're going to understand it, let alone fight it, we need an expert. And there's only one name on that list who qualifies as the best, and the worst, option. A file appeared on the monitor. It was a grainy photo of a man in a rumpled trench coat, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He looked tired, cynical, and utterly unimpressed with the world. Name, John Constantine. Affiliation, none. Liability. Expertise, occult, demonology, arcane arts, con artistry. Status, active. Avoid if possible. Oh, great, Dick groaned, rubbing his temples. Constantine. The last time I worked with him, he tricked a demon into repossessing my utility belt. He's a narcissistic, chain-smoking con man who would sell his own grandmother for a pack of fags and a cursed grimoire, Oracle agreed. But he knows more about the dark arts than anyone else on the planet. He frequents a place called the Oblivion Bar. It's an extra-dimensional watering hole for the magically inclined. You can't get there with the wing. You need a magical key. How do we get one? Deku asked. You don't, a new voice said. Constantine's, raspy and thick with a Scouse accent, suddenly crackled over their comms. Because you're not invited, you bloody capes. Everyone froze. A feedback squelch, and Constantine's haggard face appeared on the screen, a rune glowing faintly on his forehead. He'd hacked their encrypted channel. Listen, mates, he said, blowing a stream of smoke at the camera. I know all about your little recruitment drive. Trying to get the band back together. It's sweet, really, but whatever cosmic mess you've gotten yourselves into, count me out. I've got my own soul to worry about, and frankly, it's in enough trouble without getting tangled up with you lot. Piss off. The screen went dead. Well, Dick said into the silence. That went about as expected. He said we need a key, Deku mused, his mind already working. But he was able to get to us. He projected himself onto our comms. That's a magical link. A two-way street. Dick and Kara looked at him. Oracle, Deku said, a wild idea forming. Can you trace the energy signature of his transmission? It's chaotic, laced with hexes and misdirection spells, she replied, the sound of furious typing in the background. But yes. I think I can lock onto its point of origin. It won't be a door, more like punching a hole. Do it, Deku said. I'll go alone. Bad idea, Dick countered. You don't know what you're walking into. That's the point, Deku replied. He expects a cape. He expects you. He doesn't know me. I'm another anomaly. And right now, that's our only advantage. The whole Oracle punched in reality felt like stepping through a sheet of cobwebs into a freezer. Deku emerged not in a street or a building, but in the middle of a bar that defied every law of physics. The Oblivion Bar was carved from the heart of a living shadow. The walls seemed to shift and writhe, and the patrons were a menagerie of the beautifully strange and the utterly terrifying. A well-dressed man with the head of a bull played cards with a blue-skinned djinn. A phantom in spectral armor nursed a glowing drink at the bar. The air was thick with the smell of spilled beer, ancient dust, brimstone, and 1,000 forgotten stories. And there, sitting alone in a corner booth, nursing a glass of amber liquid, was John Constantine. He looked up as Deku appeared, not with surprise, but with a deep, world-weary sigh of annoyance. You're a persistent little bugger, aren't you? He rasped, taking a long drag from his cigarette. Didn't I tell you to sod off? You did, Deku said, walking over to the booth. He ignored the hostile glares from the other patrons. But Vandal Savage used magic to take down the Justice League. We need your help to understand how. Constantine chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. Let me get this straight. The big lads, gods and monsters, the best of the best, get taken off the board by an immortal caveman with a magic wand, and you, a kid in a green bunny suit who looks like he just fell out of a Japanese cartoon, think you're going to fix it? The optimism is nauseating. Piss off. I'm busy. What are you busy with? Feeling sorry for yourself? Deku countered, his tone unexpectedly sharp. Constantine's eyes narrowed. I'm busy staying alive, son. A trick you lot never seem to master. This world, the real world underneath all your spandex and press conferences, is a meat grinder. It's full of things that would eat your precious hope for breakfast, and your shiny-teethed heroes for dinner. I don't fight for humanity. I fight to keep the doors shut on the things that want to devour it. There's a difference. There isn't, Deku said simply. Not if people are getting hurt. Oh, you're one of those, Constantine sneered, taking a gulp of his drink. A proper bleeding heart. Look, kid, I'm not a hero. I'm a pragmatist. And right now, pragmatism tells me that getting involved in a fight that took out Superman is a one-way ticket to a hell I've already visited twice. No thank you. He was about to say more when the temperature in the bar plummeted. The cheerful din died down. The patrons, even the demonic ones, began to look nervous. A black, oily mist started to seep from the floorboards near their booth. Ah, bollocks, Constantine muttered, stubbing out his cigarette. Right on schedule. The mist coalesced into a figure. It was tall and thin, clad in a suit made of what looked like stitched-together shadows. Its face was a smooth, porcelain mask with two burning embers for eyes, and it carried a wicked-looking, hook-ended ledger. John Constantine. The creature's voice was the sound of grinding tombstones. The pact of penance is overdue. A soul for a soul. The Infernal Collection Agency has come to claim its property. Constantine plastered a smirk on his face, though Deku's danger sense told him the man was terrified. Belial, mate, good to see you. Look, there's been a bit of a mix-up with the paperwork. If you could just come back next Tuesday. The contract is binding, the demon, Belial, intoned, ignoring him. It pointed a long, skeletal finger at the bartender, a hulking golem of a man. By the terms of the accord, you offered the soul of the most innocent in this room as collateral for your escape from the Asmodeus imprisonment. Belial's fiery eyes scanned the bar, passing over the various monstrous patrons before finally landing on Deku. And it seems we have a new contender. Constantine's blood ran cold. He had made that deal years ago, never expecting a truly innocent soul to ever set foot in the Oblivion Bar. Deku stood up. He didn't know the specifics of the deal, but he understood the threat. This creature was here to harm someone because of Constantine's actions. Leave him alone, Deku said, stepping between the demon and the bartender. Belial let out a dry, rasping laugh. You reek of goodness. A veritable feast. The contract is clear. I am here for the most innocent soul. And you, little hero, have just won the grand prize. A spectral, hooked chain shot out from the demon's sleeve, aimed not at Deku's body, but at his chest, seeking to rip his soul from its mortal coil. Constantine was already muttering a banishing spell, but it was too slow. The chain was almost upon Deku. But Deku didn't dodge. Black whip, dark energy tendrils, a power born of human will and emotion, erupted from his back and met the supernatural chain head-on. There was a screech of conflicting energies, one divine in its own way, the other infernal. The very air between them sizzled. Fascinating, Belial hissed. Your soul is crowded. No matter. More for the collection. The demon lunged, its shadowy claws extending. It didn't fight like a physical being. Its attacks phased through Deku's blocks, not aiming for his flesh, but for his life force. Deku felt a chilling cold seep into his body, a draining sensation that made him feel weak, dizzy. It was an attack on his spirit. He felt the vestiges recoil. This was not a quirk. This was anathema. Ninth, its essence is decay. The second user's voice roared in his mind. Do not let it touch you. Deku used FA gene and gearshift, moving with impossible speed, but the demon was ethereal, matching his every move. It was a fight he couldn't win by punching. He needed to attack its nature. He remembered his conversation with Kara. He remembered what he stood for. He stopped dodging and faced the demon. He let go of his fear and focused on the core of One for All, the tiny, brilliant spark that had been passed from Yoichi. The spark of self-sacrifice, the will to help others. He activated full cowling, but this time, the green lightning was different. It was brighter, purer, infused with the combined willpower of 9 heroes who had dedicated their lives to protecting the innocent. As Belial lunged for the final time, Deku didn't punch. He pushed his hands forward, unleashing not a shockwave, but a blinding, radiant wave of pure, heroic intent. It was the physical manifestation of hope. The wave of light struck the demon. It didn't burn, it purified. For a creature made of shadow and malice, it was agony. Belial shrieked, its form dissolving, the shadows unraveling as the light washed over it. This is not over, Constantine. It howled as it was forcibly discorporated, banished back to whatever hell it called home. The bar was silent. Deku fell to one knee, panting. His skin was pale, and a trickle of black, viscous fluid dripped from his nose. The fight had taken a toll, not on his body, but on his soul. He had pushed back hell with his own life force. Constantine stared at him, his cigarette forgotten, burning down to his knuckles. He had seen archangels and demons wage war. He had seen gods rise and fall, but he had never, in all his damned life, seen anything like that. The kid hadn't just fought the demon. He had weaponized his own goodness. He had taken a hit meant for a stranger, a consequence of Constantine's own selfish actions, and had nearly unmade himself to stop it. Slowly, Constantine walked over and helped Deku to his feet. You are, without a doubt, he said, his voice an odd mix of awe and utter exasperation, the single stupidest, most certifiably insane bloke I have ever met. He took a deep breath and ran a hand through his messy blonde hair. Right. Fine. You win. You'll help us? Deku asked, his voice weak. No, Constantine said, lighting a new cigarette with a shaky hand. I'm going to tag along to make sure you don't accidentally redeem a bloody archdemon and trigger the apocalypse with your pathological need to be a martyr. He took a long drag. And maybe, just maybe, I'm a little curious to see how this ridiculous story of yours ends. Now let's get out of this dump. The drinks are rubbish. Part 3, The Dawn of Justice. The Watchtower was a ghost ship adrift in an endless, silent sea. When they materialized on the main teleportation pad, a feat managed by Oracle hijacking the station's dormant systems, the first thing that hit them was the silence. A profound, echoing quiet that seemed to absorb all sound. The second was the cold. The station's life support was on minimum, the air still and frigid. Deku, Nightwing, Kara, and a perpetually grumbling Constantine stood in the main command center. A fine layer of dust coated every surface. The massive central view screen was dark, showing only their faint reflections against the backdrop of the swirling, beautiful earth below. And in the center of the room, arranged around a massive conference table, were the 7 chairs. Superman's, Batman's, Wonder Woman's. Each one was a throne, and each one was empty. The weight of the legacy they were confronting was palpable. It was a mausoleum of gods, a testament to an age that was over. I haven't been up here since, Kara started, her voice trailing off as she stared at her cousin's empty seat. None of us have, Dick finished for her, his hand resting on the back of Batman's chair. The familiar shape, the unyielding material, was a comfort and a pain all at once. Bit morbid, isn't it? Constantine muttered, pulling his trench coat tighter. Like holding a seance in a graveyard. I half expect to see old Batsy's ghost pop out and tell us all to get off his lawn. We can't work from here, Dick said, turning away from the chair. It's too much. You're wrong, Deku said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. He walked towards the central console, his footsteps the only sound. This is exactly where we need to be. We shouldn't hide from this. We should learn from it. He placed his hands on the dusty console. Oracle, can you give me access to the primary power conduit? It's been cold for months, Izuku, she warned from their comms. A standard jump start won't work. It needs a massive, sustained energy surge to restart the fusion core. Deku smiled. Good thing I specialize in massive energy surges. Green lightning began to crackle around him. He took a deep breath, channeling one for all not as a weapon, but as a source of life. The energy flowed from his hands into the console, a torrent of verdant power. The lights on the panel flickered. The station groaned, its ancient machinery stirring from a long slumber. More, Oracle urged. The core is starting to respond. Deku gritted his teeth, pushing more power into the system. Kara, seeing him strain, flew to his side and placed her hands next to his, feeding the station a stream of her own solar energy. The combined power, one of will, one of starfire, was enough. With a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the entire station, the watchtower came back to life. The lights came on, bathing the room in a clean, white glow. The view screen flickered, then stabilized, showing a crystal-clear, breathtaking view of the planet below. Environmental readouts and status reports began to scroll across the secondary monitors. The 4 of them stood there for a long moment, bathed in the renewed light, looking out at the world they had sworn to protect. It was a small group. A lost boy from another dimension, a grieving daughter of a dead world, a cynical sorcerer who trusted no one, and a prodigal son trying to escape his father's shadow. They were not the Justice League. They were a collection of broken pieces, held together by a shared, desperate hope. So, what's the plan then, Chosen One? Constantine asked, breaking the silence. Deku looked at the earth, then at the faces of his new, unlikely allies. He thought of the empty chairs behind him, not as a burden, but as a foundation. We start small, he said, his voice filled with a quiet, unshakable certainty. We answer the calls. We save who we can. We show the world that the sky is not empty. We remind them what it feels like to look up and have hope. He turned to face them, a determined smile on his face. Our work is just beginning. The first dawn of a new age of justice was breaking, not with a triumphant roar, but with the quiet hum of a resurrected dream, high above a world that had forgotten how to look at the stars.